Marcus Thompson stood at the entrance of the luxury hotel, his uniform crisp and his posture straight. To everyone who passed by, he was just another security guard doing his job. The wealthy guests barely noticed him as they walked through the marble lobby, with their designer clothes and expensive watches. Business executives talked loudly on their phones, celebrities tried to avoid cameras, and politicians moved with their small armies of bodyguards. But Marcus was different from what people thought. Behind his calm eyes was a mind that never stopped working. He watched everything and everyone. His training had taught him to notice things that others missed. The way someone walked, how they held their hands, where their eyes looked. These small details told him stories that most people would never understand. The hotel was one of the most expensive in London. It hosted important meetings, secret business deals, and powerful people who shaped the world. Marcus had been working there for 6 months, and everyone knew him as the quiet guard who never caused trouble. The other security guards liked him because he was helpful and never complained about working extra hours. The hotel manager trusted him because he was always on time and did his job perfectly. What nobody knew was that Marcus had spent 15 years in the British Special Air Service, the SAS. He was not just any soldier. He was one of their best snipers. His real name was not even Marcus Thompson. That was just the name on his fake papers. His real identity was buried so deep that even government computers could not find it easily. Marcus had served in places that most people only heard about in news reports. He had been in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and other dangerous countries where wars never seemed to end. His job was to protect British soldiers and eliminate threats from very long distances. He could hit a target from over a mile away, even in bad weather or at night. Other soldiers called him Ghost because he could appear and disappear without anyone knowing he was there. 3 years ago, something had gone wrong during a mission in Eastern Europe. Marcus and his team were trying to rescue a British diplomat who had been kidnapped by terrorists. The mission was supposed to be secret, but someone had betrayed them. When they arrived at the location, it was a trap. Bullets flew from every direction and explosions shook the ground. Marcus had to make an impossible choice. He could save his teammates or complete the mission to rescue the diplomat. He chose to save his team, but it meant the diplomat died. The newspapers never reported the real story. They said the diplomat died in a car accident. But Marcus knew the truth, and it ate at him every day. After that mission, Marcus could not sleep properly. He had nightmares about all the people he had killed and all the people he could not save. The military doctor said he had post-traumatic stress disorder, but Marcus did not want to talk about his feelings. He just wanted to disappear from the world of violence and death. The SAS offered him a desk job, but Marcus refused. He had spent too many years looking through rifle scopes and watching people die. He wanted a normal life, or at least something that felt normal, so he quit the military and used his contacts to get false identity papers. Marcus Thompson was born and the Ghost disappeared. Working as a hotel security guard was perfect for Marcus. He could use his skills to watch for danger, but he did not have to hurt anyone. The most exciting thing that happened was when drunk guests got too loud, or when photographers tried to sneak pictures of famous people. It was boring compared to his old life, but boring was exactly what he wanted. The other guards thought Marcus was just very good at his job. He could spot troublemakers before they caused problems. He noticed when someone was carrying a weapon, even if it was hidden very well. He could tell when people were lying or when they were planning something bad. But he never explained how he knew these things. He just said he had good instincts. Marcus lived in a small apartment near the hotel. He had no friends and no family who knew where he was. His parents thought he had died in a military training accident 5 years ago. That was another lie that the government had created to protect his real identity. Sometimes he wanted to call them and tell them he was alive, but he knew it was too dangerous. There were still people looking for the Ghost, people who wanted revenge for things he had done during his missions. Every morning, Marcus put on his security guard uniform and looked at himself in the mirror. The man looking back at him seemed ordinary and safe. But behind his eyes, the Ghost was still there, watching and waiting. Marcus hoped he would never need those skills again. He wanted to believe that his days of killing and violence were over forever. The hotel guests continued to walk past him without a second glance. They saw a middle-aged man in a uniform who checked their bags and asked for identification. They had no idea that the quiet guard standing by the door had once been one of the most dangerous men in the British military. They did not know that he could kill someone with his bare hands in 3 seconds, or that he had saved more lives than most doctors. Marcus preferred it that way. In his old life, people feared him or wanted to use him as a weapon. Now people just ignored him, and that felt like freedom. He could help keep the hotel safe without anyone getting hurt. He could use his training to protect people instead of destroying them, but peace never lasts forever, especially for men like Marcus. Deep down, he knew that one day his past would catch up with him. The ghost could hide, but he could never truly disappear. And when that day came, Marcus would have to decide whether to run away again or to face the darkness he had left behind. For now, though he was just a security guard doing his job, watching over wealthy people who lived in a world very different from the one he had known, and perhaps if he was very lucky that would be enough. The morning started like any other Tuesday at the Grand Palace Hotel. Marcus checked the security cameras, reviewed the guest list, and briefed the day shift guards about potential concerns. Everything seemed normal until he saw the name on the VIP arrival list. Viktor Petrov, Russian businessman, arriving at 2 p.m. with a small security detail. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. He knew that name, but not from any business magazines or news reports. Viktor Petrov was not just a businessman. He was an arms dealer who sold weapons to terrorists and criminal organizations around the world. 3 years ago, Marcus had been ordered to eliminate Petrov during a mission in Romania, but the target had escaped when the mission went wrong. More troubling was what Marcus remembered from his SAS intelligence briefings. Petrov had a personal hatred for British Special Forces. His brother had been killed by an SAS team 5 years earlier, during a raid on a weapons warehouse. Since then, Petrov had put bounties on the heads of any SAS operatives he could identify. If Petrov was coming to London, it was not for legitimate business. Marcus tried to stay calm as he watched the hotel preparations for the VIP guest. Extra security measures were put in place, and the manager personally checked that everything was perfect. The hotel staff had no idea they were preparing to welcome one of Europe's most dangerous criminals. At exactly 2 p.m., 3 black cars pulled up outside the hotel. Marcus watched from his position near the entrance as Viktor Petrov stepped out of the middle car. He was a tall man with gray hair and expensive clothes, but Marcus could see the hardness in his eyes. This was not a man who made money through honest business deals. With Petrov came 4 bodyguards who tried to look like regular security, but Marcus could tell they were trained killers. The way they moved, how they scanned their surroundings, and the barely hidden weapons under their jackets, everything about them screamed danger. One of them, a woman with short blonde hair, caught Marcus's attention. He had seen her face before in military intelligence photos. She was Elena Volkov, a former Russian Special Forces operative who now worked as an assassin for hire. As the group entered the hotel, Marcus forced himself to act normally. He checked their identification papers and welcomed them politely, just like he would with any other guests. But his mind was racing. Why was Petrov here? What was he planning? And most importantly, did he know that Marcus Thompson was actually the ghost? Throughout the afternoon, Marcus kept a close eye on Petrov and his team. They had taken the entire top floor of the hotel, claiming they needed privacy for important business meetings. But Marcus noticed that they were setting up equipment that looked more like surveillance gear than business tools. They were also asking strange questions about the hotel's security systems and the other guests. By evening, Marcus had gathered enough information to understand that something very bad was about to happen. He overheard one of Petrov's men talking in Russian on the phone about tomorrow night's operation and eliminating all witnesses. Marcus's Russian was good, enough to understand that they were planning some kind of attack, but he needed to know more details. Using skills he had learned during his SAS training, Marcus managed to plant a small listening device near Petrov's suite. What he heard through his earpiece made his blood freeze. Petrov was not in London for business. He was here for revenge. He had discovered that several former SAS operatives were living in London under false identities, and he planned to hunt them down and kill them one by one. Worse still, Petrov had somehow obtained a list of names and addresses. Marcus heard his own fake name mentioned, along with 3 other men who had served with him in the SAS. Petrov knew exactly where they lived and worked. The attack was planned for the next night. and it would start with the hotel. Marcus realized he was facing an impossible situation. He could try to disappear again, create a new identity and run to another country. But that would mean leaving his former teammates to die, and it would mean letting Petrov continue his killing spree. Other innocent people might also get hurt during the attack on the hotel. The old Marcus, the ghost, would have already started planning how to eliminate Petrov and his entire team. But the new Marcus, the security guard who just wanted a peaceful life, was terrified of returning to that world of violence and death. He had worked so hard to leave his past behind, and now it was dragging him back into the darkness. As the night grew late, Marcus sat in the hotel's security office, staring at the monitors that showed Petrov's floor. He could see the bodyguards patrolling the hallway, and he knew that somewhere up there plans were being made to kill him and his former brothers-in-arms. Marcus thought about his old teammates. James was now working as a mechanic in East London, trying to raise his 2 young children after his wife left him. David had become a construction worker and was saving money to buy a small house. Paul worked as a taxi driver at night and took care of his elderly mother during the day. They were all just trying to live normal lives, just like Marcus. They deserved to know that death was coming for them, but warning them would mean revealing who he really was. It would mean admitting that Marcus Thompson was a lie and that the ghost was still alive. Once that secret was out, there would be no going back to his quiet life as a hotel security guard. Marcus looked at his reflection in the dark computer screen. For months he had been hiding from himself, pretending that he could escape his past. But now he had to face the truth. He could try to run and save himself, or he could stand and fight to save others. The choice would define not just his own future, but the future of everyone he had once called family. Outside, London continued its normal rhythm, unaware that a war was about to begin in one of its most elegant hotels. And in the security office, a man who had tried to disappear was slowly remembering who he really was. Marcus spent the entire night wrestling with his decision. By 6 a.m., he knew what he had to do. He could not let his former teammates die without warning them, even if it meant destroying the new life he had built. The ghost had to come back at least long enough to protect the people who had once been his family. The first person he called was James Mitchell, who was working as a mechanic in a small garage in East London. Marcus used an encrypted phone that he had kept hidden in his apartment for emergencies. When James answered, his voice was tired and rough from lack of sleep. "Who is this?" James asked suspiciously. "How did you get this number?" "It's Ghost," Marcus said quietly. "We need to talk. Your life is in danger." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then James whispered, "Ghost? But you're supposed to be dead. The military told us you died in a training accident. That was a cover story. I'm alive, but I'm not the only one who knows that. Listen carefully, James. Viktor Petrov is in London and he's coming for all of us. He has our addresses, our fake names, everything." James cursed loudly. "Petrov? That arms dealer we were supposed to take out in Romania? How did he find us?" "I don't know, but it doesn't matter now. He's planning to attack tomorrow night. You need to get your kids and disappear until this is over." "I can't just disappear," James said desperately. "My ex-wife will never let me take the kids out of London without explanation. And where would we go? I don't have money for a safe house." Marcus had expected this problem. None of his former teammates had the resources to simply vanish like he could. They had normal lives with normal responsibilities that tied them to London. "Meet me at the old warehouse in Bermondsey tonight at 10 p.m., Marcus said. "Bring David and Paul. We need to work together on this." After hanging up, Marcus called David and Paul with the same message. Both men were shocked to hear his voice, but they agreed to the meeting. Marcus could hear the fear in their voices, but also something else: relief. They had all been struggling with civilian life in their own ways, and part of them missed the brotherhood they had shared in the SAS. The rest of the day at the hotel was torture for Marcus. He had to act normal while watching Petrov and his team make their final preparations. He saw them studying maps of London and cleaning weapons that they kept hidden in their luggage. Elena Volkov spent hours on her laptop, and Marcus managed to glimpse enough of her screen to see that she was researching the backgrounds of his former teammates. Marcus also used his access to the hotel's security systems to gather as much intelligence as possible. He copied the footage from the cameras near Petrov's suite and recorded the phone conversations he could intercept. If he was going to fight these people, he needed to know everything about their plans and capabilities. At 7 p.m., Marcus finished his shift and left the hotel. He told his supervisor that he was feeling sick and might not be able to work the next day. It was not entirely a lie. He was sick with worry and fear about what was going to happen. The warehouse in Bermondsey was a place where Marcus and his team used to meet during their time in London between missions. It was abandoned and isolated, perfect for conversations that needed to stay secret. Marcus arrived early and checked the area for any signs of surveillance. Old habits were coming back quickly, and he found himself naturally falling into the tactical mindset that had kept him alive for so many years. James was the first to arrive, looking older and more tired than Marcus remembered. Military life had been hard on all of them, but civilian life seemed to have worn James down in a different way. David came next, still built like the mountain of muscle he had been in the SAS, but his eyes had lost some of their sharpness. Paul was the last to arrive, walking with a slight limp from an old injury that had never healed properly. The four men stood in the dusty warehouse, looking at each other with a mixture of joy and sadness. They had been closer than brothers once, sharing dangers and victories that most people could never imagine. But the years of separation and the weight of their secrets had changed them all. "I can't believe you're alive," David said, gripping Marcus's shoulder. "We all thought we had lost you." "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you," Marcus replied. "The mission in Romania went wrong and they decided it was safer if everyone thought I was dead." Paul shook his head angrily. 3 years, Marcus. 3 years we mourned you. Do you know what that did to us? I know, and I'm sorry, but right now we have bigger problems than my fake death. Marcus quickly explained everything he had learned about Petrov's plan. He showed them the photos he had taken and played the audio recordings of the conversations he had intercepted. "So what's the plan?" James asked. "Do we run or do we fight?" "Running might not work," Marcus said. "Petrov has resources and connections all over Europe. Even if we escape London, he'll eventually find us." "And what about your kids, James? What about your mother, Paul? These people don't care about collateral damage." David cracked his knuckles, a sound that brought back memories of dangerous missions and close calls. "So we take them out first. It's what we should have done in Romania." "It's not that simple," Marcus warned. "We're not soldiers anymore. We don't have military support or equipment. We're 4 middle-aged men with civilian jobs trying to fight trained killers who have every advantage." But even as he said it, Marcus could see the change in his former teammates. The years had made them softer and slower, but the core of what they had been was still there. They were SAS, and SAS never backed down from a fight no matter how impossible the odds seemed. "What do you need from us?" Paul asked quietly. Marcus felt a familiar mixture of pride and fear. He was proud that his brothers were willing to fight, but afraid of what that fight might cost them. In the SAS, they had always known that some missions might be one-way trips. But back then they were young men with nothing to lose. Now they had families and futures to think about. "I need you to trust me," Marcus said, "and I need you to be ready to become soldiers again, even if it's just for one night." The 4 men spent the next 2 hours planning their response to Petrov's attack. They had no weapons, no backup, and no official support, but they had something that Petrov probably did not expect. They knew he was coming, and they remembered how to fight as a team. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Marcus looked at his former brothers one last time. Tomorrow night, the ghost would come out of hiding, and Marcus Thompson, the security guard, would probably disappear forever. But if it meant protecting the people he cared about, it was a price he was willing to pay. In a small village, a cat named Whiskers discovered a magic fish in a pond. The fish promised 3 wishes in exchange for its freedom. Whiskers wished for endless fish, a cozy bed, and a bell that rang softly. The fish granted all 3 wishes and swam away, leaving Whiskers content. The next morning, Marcus returned to the hotel as if nothing had changed. But everything was different now. He was no longer Marcus Thompson, the quiet security guard. The ghost was awake, and every instinct that had kept him alive through 15 years of combat was fully active. Marcus used his access to the hotel's systems to learn everything possible about Petrov's schedule and security arrangements. He discovered that Petrov had reserved the hotel's main conference room for 8 p.m. that evening, claiming he needed to host an important business dinner. But the guest list was fake, and the catering order was too small for a real dinner party. It was clearly a cover for something else. More concerning was what Marcus found when he checked the hotel's delivery records. Throughout the day, several packages had been delivered to Petrov's suite, but they were not addressed to any legitimate business. The shipping labels had been altered, and the delivery drivers were not from any recognized courier companies. Marcus suspected that weapons and explosives were being smuggled into the hotel piece by piece. During his lunch break, Marcus met with James in a small cafe near the hotel. James had managed to convince his ex-wife to take their children to visit her parents in Scotland for a few days. He told her it was a surprise vacation, but Marcus could see the worry in his eyes about lying to his family. "I found us some equipment," James said quietly, sliding a small bag across the table. "My garage works on police vehicles sometimes, and they trust me with access to their storage area. I managed to borrow a few things that might help." Marcus looked inside the bag and found police-issue body armor, tactical radios, and night vision goggles. It was not military-grade equipment, but it was better than nothing. "This is good, but we still need weapons." "David is working on that," James replied. "He knows people from his construction job who have connections to less legal activities. He thinks he can get us some handguns and maybe a rifle." Marcus nodded, but he was worried about involving civilians, even criminal ones, in their operation. The fewer people who knew about their plans, the better. "What about Paul?" "He's been driving around London all day, mapping escape routes and identifying safe houses. His taxi driver knowledge of the city is actually very useful." James paused and looked directly at Marcus. "Are you sure about this plan? We're talking about a gun battle in one of London's most famous hotels. Innocent people could get hurt. Petrov is planning to kill us whether we fight back or not," Marcus said. "At least this way, we have some control over when and where it happens. And I've been studying the hotel's layout. If we do this right, we can minimize the risk to guests and staff." That afternoon, Marcus carefully positioned himself to overhear more of Petrov's conversations. What he learned made his blood run cold. Petrov was not just planning to kill Marcus and his teammates. He was planning to make it look like a terrorist attack. The Russian had connections to a Middle Eastern criminal organization, and he intended to frame them for the violence at the hotel. The plan was clever and evil. Petrov would eliminate his personal enemies while creating an international incident that would damage relationships between Britain and several other countries. The fake terrorist attack would be blamed on foreign agents, and Petrov would disappear back to Russia as just another innocent businessman who survived a horrible tragedy. Marcus realized that stopping Petrov was about more than just saving his own life and the lives of his teammates. If Petrov succeeded, his plan could damage Britain's national security and potentially start a much larger conflict. The stakes were higher than Marcus had initially understood. At 6 p.m., Marcus finished his shift and left the hotel for the last time as a security guard. His supervisor was annoyed that Marcus was calling in sick again, but Marcus no longer cared about maintaining his cover identity. After tonight, Marcus Thompson would either be dead or would have to disappear permanently anyway. The 4 former SAS operatives met at a different warehouse, this one closer to the hotel. David had successfully obtained weapons from his criminal contacts: 4 pistols, 1 sniper rifle, and a small amount of explosive charges. It was not much compared to what they had used during their military careers, but it would have to be enough. Paul had created detailed maps showing 3 different escape routes from the hotel, along with the locations of safe houses where they could hide if the operation went wrong. He had also stolen a van that they could use for transportation, changing the license plates to make it harder to track. "I've been thinking about our biggest problem," Marcus said as they prepared their equipment. "We're outnumbered, and we don't know exactly how many people Petrov has with him. We need to find a way to even the odds before the shooting starts." James suggested using the hotel's fire alarm system to create confusion and force an evacuation of innocent guests. David wanted to sabotage Petrov's equipment to prevent him from communicating with any outside support. Paul proposed creating a diversion to split up Petrov's forces, but Marcus had a different idea, one that would require him to use skills he had hoped never to use again. "I'm going to take out their leader first," he said quietly. "If I can eliminate Petrov with a long-distance shot, the rest of his team will be confused and easier to handle." The other 3 men stared at him. They knew Marcus was an exceptional sniper, but what he was proposing was extremely dangerous. "You'd have to get close enough to have a clear shot, but far enough away to avoid their security," David said. And you'd only get one chance. If you miss, they'll know we're coming. I won't miss, Marcus said with a confidence that surprised even himself. The ghost never misses. They spent the next hour reviewing the plan and coordinating their timing. Marcus would position himself in a building across from the hotel with the sniper rifle at exactly 9 p.m. When Petrov was scheduled to be in the conference room, Marcus would take his shot. Immediately afterward, James, David, and Paul would storm the hotel to deal with any remaining threats. It was a simple plan, which made it more likely to succeed. Complex operations had too many things that could go wrong, and they did not have the resources to handle complications. They would have to rely on their training, their experience, and their trust in each other. As the sun set over London, the four men prepared for what could be their final mission together. They checked their weapons, tested their radios, and reviewed their escape routes one last time. Each man was thinking about what he might lose if the operation failed, but also about what the world might lose if they did not try to stop Petrov. Marcus looked at his watch. In 3 hours, he would find out whether the ghost still had what it took to complete an impossible mission. The quiet security guard was gone forever, and in his place stood a trained killer who was ready to do whatever it took to protect innocent people and serve his country one last time. Purring in the sun. At 8:30 p.m., Marcus was lying flat on the roof of an office building across from the Grand Palace Hotel. The sniper rifle was positioned perfectly, its scope focused on the large windows of the hotel's conference room. Through the glass, he could see Viktor Petrov moving around the room, apparently setting up some kind of presentation for his fake business meeting. Marcus had not held a sniper rifle for 3 years, but his hands remembered exactly how it should feel. The weight of the weapon, the texture of the grip, the way his fingers should rest on the trigger. Everything came back to him as if no time had passed at all. The ghost had been sleeping, but he had never really gone away. Through his earpiece, Marcus could hear the quiet voices of his teammates as they moved into position around the hotel. James was in the lobby, disguised as a businessman waiting for a meeting. David was in the parking garage, ready to cut off any escape attempts. Paul was monitoring police radio frequencies from the stolen van, prepared to warn them if law enforcement was approaching. "Ghost, this is Eagle," came James's voice through the radio. "Target is moving toward the window. He's wearing a dark blue suit and appears to be alone in the room." Marcus adjusted his scope slightly and found Petrov in the crosshairs. The Russian was standing near a table covered with documents, talking on his phone. The distance was about 400 meters, an easy shot for someone with Marcus's skills, but complicated by the need to shoot through glass without alerting anyone in the hotel. "Eagle, this is Ghost. I have a clear shot, but I need him to stay still for at least 5 seconds. Can you create a distraction to keep him in position?" "Copy that, Ghost. Give me 30 seconds. Marcus watched through his scope as James approached the hotel's front desk and began arguing loudly with the clerk about a reservation problem. The commotion was minor, but it was enough to draw the attention of everyone in the lobby, including the security guards. In the conference room, Petrov moved closer to the window to look down at the disturbance in the lobby. He stood there for a moment, watching the scene below with mild interest. It was exactly what Marcus needed. Marcus controlled his breathing the way he had been trained 15 years ago. Inhale slowly, exhale halfway, hold and squeeze the trigger with steady pressure. The rifle kicked against his shoulder and the bullet flew across the London night at over 2,500 feet per second. The shot was perfect. The bullet punched through the window and struck Petrov in the center of his chest, killing him instantly. The Russian fell backward behind the table, and the conference room suddenly looked empty from the outside. "Ghost to all units. Target down. I repeat, target down. Begin phase 2 immediately." But even as Marcus spoke into his radio, he could see that something was wrong. Through his scope, he watched as armed men appeared in the conference room, moving with the coordination of a professional military unit. There were more of them than he had expected, and they were reacting to Petrov's death much faster than civilians should have been able to. "All units, be advised," Marcus said urgently. "We have multiple hostiles in the conference room." This was a trap. They were expecting us. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. Petrov had known that Marcus was alive and working at the hotel. The entire business meeting story had been a setup designed to draw the ghost out of hiding. Marcus and his team had walked straight into an ambush. "Eagle, get out of there now," Marcus shouted into his radio. "They know who we are." But it was too late. Through the hotel's large lobby windows, Marcus could see Elena Volkov and 3 other armed operatives surrounding James. His former teammate was reaching for his concealed weapon, but he was outnumbered and caught in the open. Marcus quickly swung his rifle toward the lobby and found Elena in his scope. She was pointing a gun at James's head, probably trying to take him alive for interrogation. Marcus did not hesitate. His second shot shattered the lobby window and struck Elena in the shoulder, spinning her around and causing her to drop her weapon. The lobby erupted into chaos as hotel guests realized they were in the middle of a gunfight. People screamed and ran in all directions, making it impossible for Marcus to get clear shots at the other operatives. James used the confusion to draw his pistol and take cover behind the front desk. "Bear, Hawk, we need immediate support in the lobby," James called over the radio, using David and Paul's old call signs. David's voice came back immediately. "On my way, Eagle. I'm coming up from the garage." "Negative, Bear," Marcus shouted. "It's a trap. They have people waiting for you in the stairwells. Find another way in." Through his scope, Marcus could see armed men moving through the hotel corridors, searching room by room. They were not just looking for Marcus and his team. They were systematically checking every floor, probably to eliminate any witnesses to their operation. Marcus realized that his team was facing a much larger force than they had prepared for. Petrov had brought at least a dozen operatives, all of them trained professionals. The former SAS team was outnumbered 3-1, and they were fighting on enemy territory. "All units, listen carefully," Marcus said into his radio. "We need to change the plan. This is not a rescue mission anymore, it's about survival. Bear, can you get to the hotel's electrical systems?" "Affirmative, Ghost. I can access the main power grid from the basement." "Do it. Cut the power to the entire building in exactly 60 seconds. Eagle, when the lights go out, use your night vision to get to the emergency stairs. Hawk, start the van and be ready for immediate extraction." Marcus packed up his rifle and prepared to move to a new position. The building he was on would be discovered soon, and staying there would mean certain death. But he also knew that his teammates needed covering fire if they were going to escape from the hotel alive. As he climbed down from the roof, Marcus felt the familiar rush of combat adrenaline that he had not experienced in 3 years. His heart was beating fast, but his mind was perfectly clear. Every movement was calculated, every decision was tactical. The Ghost was fully awake now, and he was angry. Petrov might be dead, but his operatives were still trying to complete their mission. They wanted to eliminate every member of Marcus's old SAS team, and they were willing to kill innocent hotel guests to do it. That made them enemy combatants, and Marcus knew exactly how to deal with enemy combatants. The quiet security guard who just wanted a peaceful life was gone. In his place was one of Britain's most deadly soldiers, and he was going to remind these killers why the SAS was feared around the world. The war had begun, and the Ghost was ready to fight. The Grand Palace Hotel plunged into complete darkness as David cut the main power lines from the basement. Emergency lighting flickered on in the hallways, casting strange shadows that moved like ghosts through the building. The sudden blackout created exactly the chaos that Marcus needed to turn the battle in his team's favor. Marcus had moved to a new position on a fire escape across the street, where he could see into multiple floors of the hotel through his night vision scope. The enemy operatives were struggling to adapt to the darkness, using flashlights that made them easy targets against the green glow of his thermal imaging. "Goes to Eagle. What's your status?" Marcus whispered into his radio. "I'm moving up the emergency stairs to the 3rd floor," James replied, his voice tight with tension. "I count at least 8 hostiles still active. They're using the emergency lighting to search floor by floor." Marcus could see James through his scope, moving carefully up the darkened stairwell. His former teammate was using proper tactical movement, checking corners and covering angles the way they had been trained. But Marcus could also see 2 enemy operatives moving to intercept James on the 4th floor. "Eagle, you have 2 tangos coming down from above. They'll reach your position in 30 seconds. "Copy, Ghost. I see them now." Marcus watched as James positioned himself in the stairwell, using the concrete walls for cover. When the first operative appeared around the corner, James was ready. A single shot dropped the man silently, and James immediately moved to a new position before the second operative could locate him. Meanwhile, David's voice crackled through the radio from the basement. "Bear to all units. "I've found something down here you need to know about. These people brought enough explosives to bring down half the building. They weren't just planning to kill us, they were going to destroy the entire hotel." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold London night. If Petrov's team detonated those explosives, hundreds of innocent people would die. The fake terrorist attack would be far worse than Marcus had imagined. "Bear, can you disarm the charges?" Marcus asked. "Negative, Ghost. This is military-grade stuff with electronic triggers. I'd need at least an hour and proper equipment, but I can disconnect the main detonator if I can reach it." "Where is it?" "Best guess is the conference room where you took out Petrov. That's where they would have set up their command center." Marcus cursed silently. The conference room was heavily defended, and getting there would mean fighting through multiple floors of armed operatives. But if they did not stop the detonation, everyone in the hotel would die. "All units, new objective," Marcus announced. "We need to reach the conference room and disable the bomb trigger. This is no longer about us. It's about saving innocent lives." Paul's voice came through the radio from outside. "Hawk to Ghost. I'm seeing police cars approaching from the south. Someone must have called in the gunshots. You've got maybe 10 minutes before this place is crawling with cops." Marcus knew that police involvement would make everything more complicated. The officers would not know who the good guys were, and they were not trained for this kind of combat situation. They would probably get themselves killed and make it harder for Marcus's team to complete their mission. "Eagle, Bear, we need to move fast. The clock is ticking." Marcus slung his rifle across his back and began climbing down the fire escape. He could provide better support from inside the hotel, and his team needed all the help they could get. As he moved, he counted muzzle flashes from inside the building. At least 6 enemy operatives were still active, and they were all between Marcus's team and the conference room. He entered the hotel through a side entrance that he knew from his security guard days was usually unlocked. The building was eerily quiet except for the distant sounds of gunfire and the frightened voices of hotel guests who were hiding in their rooms. Marcus moved through the darkened corridors like a shadow, using every trick he had learned during 15 years of special operations. He could hear enemy operatives talking to each other in Russian, trying to coordinate their search for the former SAS team. On the second floor, Marcus found 2 operatives guarding the main stairwell. They were positioned to prevent anyone from reaching the upper floors, but they had made the mistake of using their flashlights too much. Marcus could see them clearly while remaining invisible in the darkness. He approached from behind, moving silently across the carpeted floor. The first operative never knew what hit him. Marcus's knife found the gap between his body armor and helmet in one quick, silent motion. The second operative turned at the sound of his partner falling, but Marcus was already moving. A single punch to the throat crushed the man's windpipe, and he dropped without making a sound. "Ghost to Eagle. Second floor is clear. I'm moving up to support you." Marcus found James on the 3rd floor, engaged in a firefight with 3 enemy operatives who had taken cover in a guest room. James was pinned down in the hallway, unable to advance or retreat without exposing himself to enemy fire. Marcus flanked the enemy position, using his knowledge of the hotel's layout to approach from an unexpected angle. He came through a connecting door between 2 guest suites, catching the operatives completely by surprise. 3 quick shots ended the firefight, and the 3rd floor was secure. "Nice work, Ghost," James said as they regrouped in the hallway. "Just like old times." "Not quite," Marcus replied grimly. "In old times, we had proper backup and extraction plans. Right now, we're making this up as we go." David's voice came through the radio with urgency. "All units, I've reached the main electrical panel, but I've got company down here. At least 4 tangos between me and the detonator controls." Marcus and James exchanged glances. David was trapped in the basement, and they were still 2 floors away from the conference room. Time was running out, and they were running out of options. "Eagle, you continue to the conference room," Marcus decided. "I'm going to help Bear in the basement. We need that detonator disabled." "Ghost, you can't handle 4 operatives by yourself," James protested. Marcus smiled grimly in the darkness. "Watch me." As Marcus headed for the basement, he could hear police sirens getting closer to the hotel. Soon the building would be surrounded by law enforcement officers who had no idea what they were walking into. Marcus and his team had to complete their mission before the police arrived, or hundreds of people would die in the explosion. The ghost was fully in control now, and he was ready to do whatever it took to save innocent lives, even if it meant sacrificing his own. Marcus reached the basement just as the first police cars arrived outside the hotel. Through a small window, he could see the flashing lights and officers taking positions around the building. They would storm the hotel soon, and when they did, the remaining operatives might panic and detonate the explosives early. The basement was a maze of maintenance corridors and storage rooms that Marcus knew well from his months working hotel security. He could hear David engaged in a firefight near the electrical room, the sound of gunshots echoing off the concrete walls. Marcus approached carefully, using the maze-like layout to his advantage. He found David pinned down behind a large electrical panel, while 4 enemy operatives had taken positions that prevented him from reaching the detonator controls. Bear, this is Ghost. I'm in position behind the hostels. On my signal, provide covering fire toward the left corridor. Copy, Ghost. Ready when you are. Marcus pulled out 2 of the small explosive charges that David had obtained earlier. They were not powerful, enough to bring down walls, but they would create enough confusion to change the tactical situation. He placed them at strategic points in the basement ceiling and set 30-second timers. Execute in 5, 4, 3, 2 mark. David opened fire toward the left corridor, drawing the attention of all 4 operatives. At the same moment, Marcus's charges exploded, plunging the basement into chaos as dust and debris filled the air. Using the confusion, Marcus moved through the smoke like a deadly shadow. The first operative was reloading his weapon when Marcus appeared beside him. A quick knife thrust between the ribs ended his threat permanently. The second operative spun around at the sound, but Marcus was already moving. A thrown knife caught the man in the throat before he could raise his rifle. The remaining 2 operatives tried to retreat to a more defensible position, but Marcus and David coordinated their advance perfectly. Within 2 minutes, the basement was secure, and David was working frantically to disconnect the detonator system. Ghost, I need 3 more minutes to disable this thing properly, David said, sweat dripping down his face despite the cold basement air. You've got it, Bear. Eagle, what's your status upstairs? James's voice came through the radio, strained with effort. I'm outside the conference room, but it's heavily defended. At least 6 tangos inside, and they know I'm coming. I can't get close enough to the detonator controls. Marcus looked at his watch. The police would begin their assault on the hotel within minutes. Once they entered the building, the situation would become impossible to control. Too many innocent people would be caught in the crossfire. Eagle, hold your position. I'm coming up to support you. Ghost, you can't leave me alone down here, David protested. If more operatives come down to the basement, I'm a sitting duck. Marcus made a decision that went against every tactical principle he had ever learned. He was about to split his forces and leave his teammates vulnerable, but there was no other choice. Bear, you have to finish that job no matter what happens. Even if you hear me and Eagle get killed upstairs, you keep working on that detonator. The lives of everyone in this hotel depend on you. Marcus sprinted through the hotel corridors, taking the emergency stairs 3 at a time. Behind him, he could hear the police finally breaching the main entrance. Shouts and confusion filled the lower floors as officers tried to establish control over a situation they did not understand. He found James in a fierce gun battle outside the conference room. The enemy operatives had barricaded themselves inside and were firing through the doorway at anyone who approached. James was wounded, blood seeping through his shirt from a bullet that had grazed his shoulder. How many are left inside? Marcus asked as he took cover beside his teammate. At least 4, maybe more. And Ghost, I think one of them is Elena Volkov. She survived your shot and she's coordinating their defense. Marcus was not surprised. Elena was former Russian Special Forces, and she would not go down easily. She was probably the most dangerous person in the building besides Marcus himself. Eagle, when I give the signal, throw everything you have through that doorway. I'm going in through the window. James stared at Marcus in disbelief. Ghost, that's suicide. The conference room is on the 5th floor. There's no way to reach the window. Marcus was already moving toward the stairwell that led to the roof. Trust me, Eagle. I've got a plan. On the hotel roof, Marcus found the maintenance cable that window washers use to reach the exterior of the building. It was designed to hold much more weight than one person. and it would give him access to the conference room window from an angle that the defenders would not expect. As he rappelled down the outside of the building, Marcus could see the police establishing a perimeter around the hotel. News crews were arriving, and soon the entire world would be watching what happened here. If the explosives detonated, it would be broadcast live on television. Marcus reached the conference room window and peered inside. He could see Elena Volkov directing 3 other operatives in their defense of the room. The detonator was a laptop computer on the conference table, exactly where David had predicted it would be. Marcus prepared his last explosive charge and attached it to the window frame. The blast would give him entry, but it would also alert everyone in the room to his presence. He would have maybe 10 seconds to eliminate all 4 defenders before they could trigger the explosives. "Eagle, I'm in position. Begin your assault in 30 seconds. Marcus controlled his breathing and prepared for what might be his final battle. He thought about his teammates, his fake identity as a security guard, and the peaceful life he had tried to build. All of that was over now, but if he could save the innocent people in the hotel, it would be worth the sacrifice. The window exploded inward, and Marcus swung through the opening like an avenging angel. His rifle was already up and firing as his feet hit the floor. The first operative went down before he could turn around. The second managed to raise his weapon but took 2 bullets to the chest before he could fire. Elena Volkov was faster than the others. She dove for cover behind the conference table and returned fire, her bullets coming dangerously close to Marcus's head. The fourth operative tried to reach the laptop detonator, but Marcus put him down with a single shot. It came down to Marcus and Elena, 2 of the most dangerous people in the room, facing each other across the wreckage of the conference room. Outside, police officers were storming up the stairwells, and Marcus could hear James fighting his way through the corridor. "You cannot stop this," Elena called out from behind the table. "Even if you kill me, others will complete the mission." "Maybe," Marcus replied, moving carefully to get a better angle on her position. "But they'll have to do it without you." Elena made her move, rolling out from behind the table with her pistol ready, but the ghost was faster. His shot caught her center mass, and she fell backward against the conference room wall. Marcus rushed to the laptop and began frantically typing commands to disable the detonator system. He had basic knowledge of explosive devices from his SAS training, but this was sophisticated equipment that required careful handling. David's voice came through the radio with urgent news. "Ghost, I've disabled the basement charges, but there are backup detonators throughout the building. You need to shut down the main computer system or this whole place is still going to blow." Marcus's fingers flew over the keyboard, trying every shutdown command he could remember. Finally, the screen flashed a series of warnings and then went dark. The detonator system was offline. James burst through the conference room door just as Marcus collapsed into a chair, exhausted from the battle. Outside, they could hear police, officers securing the building and calling for medical assistance. "Is it over?" James asked. Marcus looked around the conference room at the bodies of their enemies and the disabled detonator system. "It's over, Eagle. The hotel is safe." But Marcus knew that while this battle was finished, the war was not. There would be investigations, questions, and consequences for what had happened here tonight. The quiet life of Marcus Thompson was over forever, but the ghost had saved hundreds of innocent lives. As police officers entered the conference room, with their weapons drawn, Marcus raised his hands and prepared to face whatever came next. He was no longer a security guard hiding from his past. He was a soldier who had completed his mission, and he was ready to face the future, whatever it might bring.